Hi, this is Jim Thompson. My Twitter handle is at SchoolToons. Toons as in TOONS for cartoons. So what I'm doing here is I'm starting a series of tutorials for my students. I'm going to put them up for the public as well. And this is just a little bit of a simple introduction to how to use AI navigation on characters in Unity, and also looking at how to use character models downloaded from Mixamo, substituting those for the standard assets characters in Unity. Everything is deliberately kept pretty simple in these tutorials so that people with very little experience in Unity will be able to get the ideas at least. And I'll try to be as clear as I possibly can in what I'm doing. It's relatively slow paced, deliberately, so that beginners can get a handle on. Okay, so here I have in Unity, I have a scene. It's a very simple scene made up of default cubes and cylinders that have been scaled and positioned. And inside the scene, I also have a rigid body first-person controller, and right now I have an AI third-person controller as well. I got those by going to the asset store and I went standard assets, and there it is, and I downloaded it. In my project, under standard assets, characters, I went into the first person prefabs and dragged in a rigid body first person controller, and from the third person menu I brought in, again from prefabs, I brought in an AI third person controller. So both of those are in the map. Okay. And now I've gone through the process of setting up that character, but I'm going to go through it again just to give you an idea how to do it. Okay, so in the scene, I brought in this AI third-person controller. He has what's referred to as a nav mesh agent as a component. He has a collider. He has scripting attached to him that's part of the default prefab. The only thing that I've changed on him right now is I've changed his target. So, and later on we're going to look at stopping distance. So under target, what I did was I added main camera as his target. So when the scene is running, when he's active, he's going to be searching out the main camera object. So what we need to do is to set up navigation in our scene before we go any further. Okay. So on the right hand side, I have the navigation tab open already, shown right here. In order to have that shown, you just need to go into the other scene and find it. So under AI, there's navigation. That will open up the navigation window. Okay, and so now I'm looking at what do we want to do in here? Well, I want to basically bring all the parts of my scene that are the environment and add them in as mesh renderers so that my map knows what meshes are in the scene and knows that they are going to be obstacles that the character needs to avoid, or a surface that the character can move around it. Okay, so I can go into my hierarchy, and now because I clicked on mesh renders, it's limiting my list to only mesh renders. So I've got a shortened list of obstacles or objects in my list here under the hierarchy. Well, these are all things that are part of my scene. So I'm going to just grab all those meshes, and I'm going to just look at navigation. So I selected all of those, and then in navigation, I want to set those as static elements. So navigation static. And it defaults to making a navigation area called walkable, which is what we're going to want. I do not have any off mesh links here. I'm not linking to other parts of the map. This is basically a self-contained area, so I don't need to worry about mesh links. And I did that just, to keep it simple. Okay, and then under agents, this is the settings for the third-person character. What is he able to do? The radius is the collision detection area around the nav mesh agent. Height is the height of the collider for the agent. Step height is how high a step could he step up. And the max slope is set for 45 degrees. Okay, so he can step up a step of 0.75 meters. He can go up a slope that's 45. I don't have either of those in my map right now. Okay, so what we need to do now is look at baking. So on the nav mesh agent that I brought in, I'm not really changing any of those settings, so I'm going to hit bake on that. And in the areas, in the object areas that are set, they're now baked into the map. So when I look at my scene right now, I have a blue area, part of the plane, that's marked as walkable. So click on my AI third-person controller, look at him in the inspector. Okay, so he's got a target. And we're going to play with stopping distance. We're going to play with speed, but for now, I'll leave it at that. Auto braking is turned on. Hit play. Okay, and so the AI character is coming towards me, and he's still running now. And he's still running now, and you can see him kind of slipping around in a circle around me. That's the colliders. I've got a capsule collider, and so does he. And those capsule colliders are now, they're hitting each other, and he's just kind of slipping off the edge of my collider as he tries to come towards me. And he's kind of pushing me. Okay, so if I don't add any force myself, he's pushing me around. Okay, so I'm going to hit escape. I'm going to get out of that scene. So I want to change him. I'm going to turn him into a follower right now. So if you're a fan of games like Skyrim where you've got followers, this is kind of how it works. So I'm going to slow him down just so we can see his movement more. So I'm going to just say 0.75. I'm going to leave all of the other settings. Stopping distance, I'm going to make that 3. So he'll stop 3 meters away from me. Still have main camera as transform. I'm not changing any of the settings for the third person controller. Hit play. And you'll see now he's coming towards me. And now he's stopping 3 meters away from me. And I can go and, like right now, if you look at his speed, he's not quite on the ground, so I can kind of adjust his positioning a bit. But basically he's in the scene. Okay, so I'm going to run around the scene. I'm going to turn around, and he's following me, a dutiful follower, wherever I go on the map. He's finding me. Ah, wow, I went around the corner. Okay, so he's intelligent enough that depending on where I am and where his location is, he will find the shortest direct route. He's not following my path. He's doing whatever makes the most sense to get to my current location. Okay, so again, I'm going to stop. Okay, so those are things that you can play with. You can play around with his steering. You can play around with what is his target. You can play around with his stopping distance to get him to do the kind of behavior that you want him to do as a follower, just following you around the map. Okay, so that's the standard assets. The character that's in there, if I expand AI third-person controller, let's have a look at what's inside there. Okay, there's Ethan Body. This is the model of that character. It has a mesh render kind of stuff. It has a default shader. There's no textures attached to that, so that's why he's showing as gray. And he's separated into two meshes. There's a body, there's glasses, and then there's a skeleton. Okay. Yeah, and if we hide the body, hide the glasses, there's a skeleton object in there, and there are game objects for each of his skeleton parts, but those are objects that aren't visible. When I click on it, all it is a transform, a point in space. Okay, but it does have position, does have rotation on it. Okay, on the character itself. The character itself has, like I mentioned before, a nav mesh agent. It also has an animator. Okay, and that animator is using a controller. And if I get an animator window open, we can have a look at that. So I'm going to go Window, Animation, Animator. Okay, so in this case, in this character, it has an animation system based on whether he's moving normally on the ground. That's the default. Whether he's crouching, whether he's airborne. So there's a different system of animations. This airborne one it's a blend tree. If let's actually go into the grounded one. So I'm going to go into grounded. So it's quite an elaborate system. It has idle, it has animation for turning right, for turning left while he's standing, all of these different animations. I'm not going to go into this. We're going to just use the default one, but just so you know, it's a fairly complicated setup with different animations for different things while he's standing, walking, running. Basically, idle, left, right. Okay. And I'll go back to the base layer. So that's the setup. It takes an animator to do the animations, and inside that animator, there's a system for controlling which animations play when. And it shows up on the character as the animator controller, which is a link that you can change. The avatar, think of avatars as the skeleton. Okay, so in my scene, he has a skeleton. And that skeleton is all of these subparts, basically transformed in space, that have a position and a rotation. And typically the scale is always going to be 1. So what we're going to do, we're going to go to Mixamo, we're going to get a different character, and we're going to take the same AI character and use a different log line. Okay, so I'm going to go to Mixamo now. So I'm going down to Chrome. Here's Mixamo. In order to get these characters, you need to have an Adobe ID. So I've logged in under my Adobe ID already, and I'm looking at characters. There's also another way that you can get characters through Adobe Fuse. I'm not going to get into that. I'm trying to keep this as simple as possible. So on Mixamo, once you've logged in, you can look at characters, you can look at animations. Okay, so there are all kinds of animations that you can use, and there are ways for us to apply them to any downloaded character that we want, but I'm not going to get into that yet until we get to doing the third-person control. What we're going to look at is just the characters. Okay, so I look through the characters. Okay, and there's 2 pages that show by default. If you know what you're doing, there's actually more characters than that. I happen to know, actually no, they've added in. So this guy didn't used to be on the list, the goblin, he's now showing. Okay, so I could pick any of these characters. The only one that I have found that doesn't really work that well is called Mutant. And I'll just see if they still have him on the list here. Yeah. Okay, so I would avoid using this guy. His skeleton isn't quite the same as the rest. And I would kind of avoid using that goblin one that I showed, because he's kind of short and deformed wherever he went. Yeah, I would avoid using him because he's kind of short and deformed. All the rest that I've tried anyway, they work pretty well, but it's not perfect. Okay, so when you pick a character, I've picked Ma Ligo here, just because he looks totally wacky, so I kind of like him. What we want to do is to download that character. Okay, so I'm going to click on download, and it comes up with some options here. T-pose is fine. That's how Unity wants to get the model. And you want FBX for Unity. So not the regular FBX, but FBX for Unity is going to import the best way. So you select that, hit download. And it's pretty fast service. You get it pretty quickly. And I've already done that. So I'm going to go to my downloads folder here, and this is what I got. Shows a Unity symbol on it, under Windows 10 at least, and doesn't show the file extension, but it's there. Okay. In my Unity project, all I needed to do to bring that object in was to bring it into my assets folder. Okay, and so I brought it into a folder that I had created already. Sorry, actually I don't remember where I brought him in. Okay, so don't remember where you brought him in? Type in a name. So in the search window, here's Ma. Here he is. He's just out in the open in assets. Okay, so in my assets, I can click, and there he is. Okay, so when you bring in a character in from Mixamo, you need to do some changes to it in order to make it usable. If you look at model, generally speaking, to begin with, you don't need to change too much, but it does bring in stuff that you don't really need. You don't need cameras, you don't need lights. Well, there actually won't be any in that folder from Mixamo, but you could turn that on. Rig. This you must change. Under rig, animation type, the default's going to be generic. You need to change it to humanoid. And then it's going to give you need to hit apply, and then you need to hit configure. And it'll prompt you to save your scene. You can go ahead and do that, and it'll bring you into this rigging scene. Most of the models in Mixamo, when you bring them into Unity, you're going to get all green lights. All green lights means it has found the skeleton structure for that character. It fits into the structure that Unity isn't expecting, and everything's a go. Okay, so I don't need to change anything that's there. There's another tab for muscles and settings. I'm not going to play around with that at all. I'm just going to leave things at default, but there may be, if we set up this character and we notice that some parts aren't really lining up the way they need to, you could have a look at some of the muscle settings and see if you can tweak them. We're not going to do that. It's going to work good enough for us without that. So hit done on that. Takes you back to your scene, and I'll go back on third person, onto the AI third person controller. Okay, so now what I want to do, I want to start bringing Ma into the scene to replace the Ethan body. I'm going to turn on the Ethan body and turn on his glasses again just so you can see. Okay, so I'm going to stop this video at this point, and then I'll pick up on a new video in the same scene at the same point. I'll do a little review, and then we'll continue with replacing this default Ethan character with the Ma character I brought in